Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vision 2060, a future focused podcast series. How can we build trusted partnerships that would shape the strategic value chains of the future? Joining me today is Mr. Aabhas Babbar. This is a very big statement saying that the space sector is going to be one of those sectors which, even as of now, IIT is the biggest sector, which contributes the most towards the Indian GDP as well.
Just think about what makes us unique and why there is conviction in what I feel. From 70s when we launched our first rocket on back of a bullock cart.
What are the trusted trade routes for us? And who are those trusted allies that we have as of now for all these trade partnerships that we're looking at in the future as well?
I think I love these new words which are coming up firstly.
You would not risk your daily bread and butter for that. That's the question. Yeah.
There's one way to put it. Right? It's okay. We will fail and we should accept failures and accept failures and hopefully cherish them also, right? And that's what some of our culture, like if you go to, any startup ecosystem which is thrived, it's because they've celebrated failures as well.
Where do you think India should go as of now to make sure that our supply chains do not face this kind of disruption again?
My approach potentially. It is a very complicated question. Even within the West and the global South, there are different countries. Each country has its own merits. Each country has its own what they bring to the table and what India can bring them on the table for them.
I'm just asking from a manufacturing point of view. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vision 2060, a future focused podcast series supported by the US Department of State's IVLP Impact Initiative. And I'm your host, Samridhi Shoor. And today we will explore a very crucial question, which is how can we build trusted partnerships that would shape the strategic value chains of the future. Joining me today is Mr. Aabhas Babbar, a seasoned strategy consultant with deep experience in driving global cooperation, catalyzing industry, academia, research collaborations, and informing impactful policy initiatives. With his deep understanding in macroeconomic shifts, Aabhas offers unique insights into future of advanced manufacturing, illuminating India's strategic role as an essential partner in today's rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape. Hi, Aabhas. It's very nice to have you with us in the podcast series Vision 2060. So, before we begin, I would really love to know how exactly did you get into this world of consulting and strategy? And also, since we have had a lot of conversation, what exactly got you interested in the world of defense, aerospace, and space in general? So, I think these are some of the areas which the world in general is getting interested right now. Some reasons are good, some are not.
Absolutely.
But yes, this is definitely a very interesting time to be in this space and would love to know your opinion on this.
Oh, thank you, Samriddhi, for having me. Hi, everyone. So, strategy happened because I was always very passionate to know how things really work. So, that was a childhood passion. When I grew up in Delhi, then I went for my dual degree at BITS. And then every time, whatever I used to approach on what I could not see on the surface, right? So, why it's happening, what is happening, how it's happening. So, that was always the passion for me. And once I started exploring that, my pathway was very clear after that. So, post when I graduated from BITS, I wanted to do something on the strategy side. And that's where I went to consulting. And that in itself is a journey for maybe for a different day, but essentially understanding business problems, looking at the macro forces, how it impacts the business, and
Right.
what decision I need to do now and execute them, but also thinking forward and planning it. So that's something which I've been very passionate about. And in the bigger scheme of things, the second topic which I'm really passionate about is strategy of a company. Now, if you think there are hundreds and thousands of companies, aggregate that to a country level. How does a country work? What does the strategy of a country looks like? And that's which got me interested into geopolitics or more about understanding how global trade works. And from there, it was more about thinking about what are some of the more important vectors which defines this. And I keep it very simple, right? There's a soft vector, which is your soft power, like cultural, cinema, food, which connect people to people, but culturally.
Right.
And the second, which I say, is the robust or the hard power. Hard power in my mind is those of your fundamental verticals, be it something like aerospace, defense, space, manufacturing, which actually defines the strength of for a country and which is fundamental to their own growth. So from there, Like from the big picture of just understanding strategy, going to what it means for a company, company to a country, and then soft and hard power. In my mind, that hard power is defined by these three, four very important critical sectors.
Well, that's very interesting. Good to know about your journey. But right now, as you're seeing that there are a lot of geopolitical shifts happening, and the global trade dynamics is changing in a lot of different ways. Where do you see India as of now? And what are the few areas, specifically in terms of manufacturing, where India can work more and can be positioned in such a way which will be beneficial to us as of now?
If I think about India, right, I think some of the sectors which we spoke about, I think will be foundational for our growth story in the next 20-25 years, I believe. In my mind, no power or no country can become a super or supreme power if they don't have the right fundamentals on some of the critical sectors like aerospace, defense, space, manufacturing. That's one part. Beyond that, it's obviously minerals, energy,
Right.
and then, as we all know, the favorite precious metal, gold, right? So it's all what helps a country really have strong roots, but at the same time have a strong say in a global voice, essentially. So from that perspective, I feel India in the next 20 years will grow leaps and bounds into these sectors, and happy to talk about how I feel that going forward.
But how do you feel that going forward?
Very well. So let's break down aerospace, space, and defense. Right, defense. If I talk to you about some of the just the last 10 to 15 years, right? So defense, from a net import, highest importer in the world, if you may, we are now building indigenous systems. That's one. Second, I think just looking at the last 3 to 4 years, our defense export has gone from almost non-existent to something like a $3 billion. Is it very big? No, but this is all in the right direction to growth, right? If you talk about aerospace as a sector, right, I think there is enough and more. I think a lot of like some of our largest corporate Tata, Adanis of the world, they're all working with multinational companies as part of joint ventures and building in India, for India and for the world, and even back for the West, right? So that's a great piece where we are, and we already have a lot of areas where we are contributing significantly in the global supply chains. And talk about space, I think space in my it's one of my favorite areas. I am really passionate about it, and I think how I think about space is sooner or later will be the kind of like how we did it in 90s, the technology or IT services. We were
Right.
doing that for the world. I think space in my mind will soon going to be that same potentially that same service which we actually provide, like from launch to services to nano satellites, you name it. I think what we have shown to the world, we can do much more with much less.
That is very true. I think doing more with less has been one of the statement Indian things to do. And this is a very big statement saying that the space sector is going to be one of those sectors which, I mean, even as of now, IIT is the biggest sector which contributes the most towards the Indian GDP as well. And if space is going to be that particular sector, do you think India being part of the space race, the global space race that is taking place as of now? And if yes, how do you foresee other allies and countries responding to that? Because though India could be a strategic partner when it comes to manufacturing value chain, for these highly capital intensive manufacturing industries. How do you think India is going to be positioned and how will the world view India when that will happen, if that happens?
That's an interesting question, right? So again, this is me not prophesizing but potentially thinking out loud. So
Yeah.
but at the
No, it's
same time,
fine.
right, I do feel and what makes us unique, let's zoom out, right, and
Right.
just think about what makes us unique and why there is conviction in what I feel. From 70s when we launched our first rocket on back of a bullock cart, right? This is
Yes.
still that iconic picture which I think, I don't know if the viewers here have seen it, but please do see that, right? That tells you about taking that rocket on back of a bicycle and bullock carts, and some parts on the bullock carts to the launch site. That has stuck with me as saying that. And today, very recently, to the space docking, which we, I think, the fourth nation to do that, right? This tells you about just in 50 years where we can be with with maybe the expenditure for our space program being maybe minuscule of what some of the global powers are actually spending. And then couple this with Indian ingenuity, hard work, and passion for results. I do feel, I think this is the strong component to actually get things done. And how others will see, again, I may not be able to comment best in terms of what will be perceived as, but I definitely know whoever I've spoken to and been part of some of the forums, there's a deep respect for our space program across the world. Right, you talk about, and we have been helping a lot of other nations also with their space program. You talk about Middle East, you talk about, we are working very collaboratively with Australia, with the EU as well, across, and US, right? We have been doing that from the start. So it's not that it's just we are doing our own thing. We have been collaboratively working with a lot of other countries and a lot of other clusters or space agencies as well, which makes me believe that we have what it takes to go there. And to talk about, if let's say in a space race, I think I do feel, I think today there's a race for everything. It's not just space, but it's for everything. As someone who's very passionate about sports in my early days, right? I think everyone will be targeting the same finishing line. Everyone is racing. Only times will tell who will win.
Well, that's interesting. Let's see who wins that race. But that being said, as of now, do you think that India has some kind of leverage when it comes to, I would say, skilled talent in this particular sector? Because in manufacturing, one of the challenges that the world is facing in general is that we, or everyone for that matter, does not really have access to the right kind of human resource. And that human resource, a lot of it, we have seen that in the past few years, it is sort of imported from India, that human resource. And if so, will we see some kind of collaboration coming out of that? Primarily because human resource is something that we are sharing with the rest of the world. And do you think space being a collaborative arena for that, and that particular point that we are getting talent from India, will make other countries more supportive to the Indian space program as well? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. So, what I feel with is two parts. One, let's say, we being, as you're mentioning, maybe net exporter of human resources,
Yeah.
let's say for across these advanced manufacturing, or maybe it's space, aerospace, defense. And second is how we can do it themselves. So, let me first take the first part potentially. When I think there's enough and more programs at our academia level, both postgraduate and graduate level, which is helping train people. But in my mind, that is not the crux of creating a future ready tech force. In my mind, future ready tech force in any of the advanced manufacturing areas is someone who understand the fundamentals, who has practical exposure. So it's very much ingrained, very much ingrained through the industry from, let's say, year 2, year 3 of my engineering, versus doing 4 years of bookish knowledge and actually then thinking about it, which I think is now happening in a lot of universities. I've actually seen that curriculum, that year 2, year 3, year 4, versus me when I did my engineering almost 15 years back, right? There is so much more exposure now, the folks have to the practical world and what they need to do. So I think that is getting bridged. It's more about just getting that continued and actually making that better. So that's one. The second part is the future ready force in any of the human resources for any of these advanced sectors also needs to know how AI, automation, AI and Gen AI can actually help them improve their own productivity. Because a lot of the things will still, let's say, there is led by machineries, it's still automated, but at the same time they need to know about how can I actually make my life or some of those processes more productive. I think getting that fundamental knowledge through the start become first creates the supply base. So then once now the supply base to the demand outside, I think there are two parts. In my mind, it's also has to be very critical, because these areas like aerospace, defense, space, in my mind, are also very like sectors of national importance. Where would you like to take support from another country also is a critical thing, which may differ by
Yes.
different countries, by the way.
True.
I don't think there is one size fit all approach. Maybe a country A could work with us for something on, let's say, satellites. Country B could want very different thing. Maybe they want something on the software side. Country 3 may want something very fundamentals on building rockets. So there could be different demands and different needs for different countries. I think what would be important is we have the right supply base of human resources which is trained, which can be available, and which is passionate about the sector. And the second part is then working with our partners and allies who we want to partner on this, let's say, space or advanced manufacturing areas, and then giving them the right access both in terms of infrastructure coupled with human resources.
That's a very nice answer. And now, coming to our next question, given that the current global dynamics are changing, there's a concept called friendshoring that is rising. And there will be trusted trade routes, there will be trusted trade partners. Where do you think India, specifically, falling into that particular dynamics when it comes to friendshoring? And what are the trusted trade routes for us? And who are those trusted allies that we have as of now for all these trade partnerships that we're looking at in the future as well?
I think I love these new words which are coming up, firstly, right? So, but going back to your question, essentially, I really love history and mythology. So let me go back in history, right?
Yeah.
We used to have the Silk Road, right? And Silk Road
Right.
used to pass through multiple countries, multiple continents. And it
Right.
signified in my mind every economy was thriving on their own merits,
Right.
but they were all partnering and working very much together, right? Through that Silk Road. And Silk Road was that, if you can say, our erstwhile supply chain across the world, if you may, right? From minerals, metals to fabrics to food,
Textile,
everything was going
yes.
through that. Before answering where India would be, I think I would talk about what makes someone or a country very trusted ally or a partner. In my mind, that's about three things. One, having, if there is a relationship already going between the two countries, it's tried and tested and time tested, and they both have been each with each other in the difficult times. I think that's first. The second is, are we able to work on the most complicated issue? While there'll be differences, it's like relationship, right? You will
Right.
always have differences, but are you able to sort those differences with dialogue
Right.
versus beating each other, right? And the third thing potentially is, you're working towards something which will a help both the countries, be it economically, strategically, or otherwise, but at the same time helping build something which can actually also impact the betterments for the world, which, that's a noble cause, but at the same time you first need to have your own strong foundation. So I think these are the three things which I'll say are the building blocks of a strong foundational strategic partnership. I think
Right.
once we have this, and in my mind, India today, and we have that history for not just last 1 or 2 decades, but multiple decades, that we have been a trusted friend and a partner who is dependable. So I think that's my perspective, that we are being witnessed as someone like that.
So this brings us to our next question. Um, One thing that I have always been very curious to understand is that some of the rich economies, or almost every single time, the rich economies, they tend to have better hardcore technologies as compared to economies which are still developing or who are still developing basic resources. So they cannot actually work on all those experimentations and innovations which are capital intensive. So, for example, if we take Europe, any country in Europe, if Europe is to work on some hardcore scientific technology that would require a lot of experimentation, and if it fails, for them, the question would be about getting maybe one step down in their lifestyle. But when it comes to an economy which is still developing or and is still developing basic infrastructure for its citizens, then for them, question of having these experimentation and then potentially failing in that would mean, it could be a matter of life and death. It could be their daily bread and butter, which would be at risk if that fails. So, a lot of times, what happens is that these MSMEs, they do not have the right resources. At least that is what used to happen, I would say, 10 or 15 years back. Right now, there have been a lot of policy changes, there have been a lot of support to these smaller companies. But that being said, the level of innovation that we are looking at as of now taking place, even at a startup level, that is something which requires radical shift in, I would say, equipments, machinery, skills, something that would be capital intensive for companies to just acquire directly. So, do you think India would be well positioned when it comes to those really high capital intensive systems or mechanisms that needs to be in place for us to succeed in these really heavy precision focused industries, which do have a lot of value to the country and economy in general, but you would not risk your daily bread and butter for that. That's the question.
Okay, that's a
Yeah.
that's one way to put it, right? So let me answer this in like maybe smaller chunks, if I may.
Yeah.
One, what does it take to succeed? I think if you have a plan B, plan C, plan D, a lot of time you actually downplay and always have a cushion to create, right? I think we as Indians in general, or the entrepreneurs or the MSMEs, I think they just have a plan A. And I've seen that multiple times. So they're really very focused. So I think that really helps, and that brings a differential thinking that you want to make it successful. Now, talking about the bigger scheme of things, our appetite to actually take in large capex projects with something which may not yield immediate return or uncertain return, right? So I'll not answer this as a consultant, because as a consultant I'll say, okay, I'll do my calculations, IRRs, my business plan, etc., 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 and this is the answer. But I think the answer
Okay.
is a little bit more nuanced and forward looking. Two parts, right? If I think about, and take a let's take a like, this is the world of AI, Gen AI. Everyone's talking, oh, when will India build its own sovereign AI model, right? You need X billions of dollars of investment, GPUs in data center, nuclear power
True.
plant to kind of do
Very
that.
true.
Will India do that or not? Again, I don't know, right? But I have a perspective on some of the large capex projects. I think we have shown with us with the manufacturing story on the semiconductors, right? We can deliberate. We are coming in late, but we have now been there.
Mm.
We have shown the world that we can think big, and we have the appetite for multi-billion dollar capex investments. That's a great start,
Yeah.
right? To show what is critical. We are ready, which government and private sector both are ready to actually back that up. So
Mm.
that's a great foundation. Third is, in my mind, it's about when you are actually investing. Some of these large scale capex projects takes 3 to 7 years
Mm.
typically.
True.
I think there are two parts. One, how do we make the project financing which is equipped to certain some of these projects and supported with the government in terms of the right aid. But at the same time, when you create a large capex project, I think the multiplier in economy is anywhere between 1 is to 3 to 1 is to 5x, which means so many more jobs will be created around that one large project, be it through MSMEs, which will supply some products or actually help in the application of those products. And then there is the trickle down impact on the hotels and cabs and the overall infrastructure, which is secondary. But now coming to your part on MSMEs, because how should they think about thinking on the large or some of these areas which are capital intensive? I think firstly, it's about where we are strong and what is our vision. I think having a very clear line of sight in terms of what way we are going. Second is, once that there is a clear line of sight where we are today, which is, let's say, where we starting from, what capabilities we have, and where we want to be. So essentially, there is that journey which we want them to also take through. And then I think it's about the third part is about how our government or the entire infrastructure, the machinery can actually help them support those exact areas which will actually help them grow into that industry. So I think in my mind, it's connecting the bigger strategy, making it down to a level what they need to know for their particular sector, what are the areas where the sector is growing and the industry is moving, and helping them in those specific areas. Today I think some of the times why the SMEs and MSMEs fail, because they don't have the very much clarity on the big picture vision. Where are we going, what it means for us, etc. I think if that can be made accessible for them, they can make better decision making, because I don't think they have all the right elements in terms of the hunger, in terms of the appetite to grow. It's just about connecting that and support by the right type of financing. And it's okay, we will fail, and we should accept failures and accept failures, and hopefully cherish them also, right? And that's what some of our culture, like if you go any startup ecosystem which has thrived, it's because they've celebrated failures as well. So I think that doing and supported by a little bit of a cushioning by the industry and government going coming together probably is the is the way going forward for our MSMEs and SMEs to be successful?
I mean, I think that in the last 10, 15 years, the best thing that has happened in India, in my personal opinion, has been the fact that there's a mindset shift. Before, because India in general has been a very merit driven civilization. Our parents, from a very young age, they start pushing us, you need to excel at your studies, you need to be excel in this and that, and almost everything, every single aspect of our lives, we have to excel. So, failure is something that is never accepted at the very grassroots home level. But now that as a society we have started celebrating failures, so that's one of the biggest change we have seen in a very long time, I would say, as a society. But that being said, I think supply chain is still something that we need to work on to become, because manufacturing depends on a lot of different factors, and supply chain is the most crucial enabling factor for that. I mean, in India, we have seen that a lot of manufacturing is done here as well, at least assembly for automotives is also something that takes place in India. And after COVID, one thing that we saw was a lot of companies were unable to deliver on time, primarily because the supply chains were disrupted. And how do you foresee this disruption? I mean, after that disruption, I think a lot of policymakers, they did come together, they did try to put their heads together and solve this particular problem. Do you think that realignment with BRICS would be a solution, or do you feel that balancing global south with Western economies, that would be a potential solution for India, to secure its own supply chain for its manufacturing sector, which is growing as of now? So where do you think like India should go as of now to make sure that our supply chains do not face this kind of disruption again?
That's a great question. I think there is no right or wrong answer probably here as well, but I'll take my
It's a
my
complicated
approach
question.
potentially. Yeah, it is a very complicated question, but you know, I'll talk about what I have seen, and this is very, very personal, right? What I've seen in India being now, like from a few decades back to in India, India is superly more confident. We make our decisions and then hopefully make them right, right? Third, we don't believe that there has to be only one world order. There could be different ways to approach the same problem together. So, with that as a mindset, I believe India today is making decisions for respective sectors and country as a whole in a way which you are not just reliant on a country for success. You're making decisions where you're taking consideration into, okay, why am I making a decision? Or let's say if I'm going to a country A, what should I partner with and why? What can I give them? And what potentially I can take their support. And third is actually what we can do together. I think with that as a simple fundamentals, we are approaching all our relationships, strategic relationship, in my opinion. Having said that, when we think about global supply chain, if you talk, I know we're not talking about semiconductor, but I think that's one of the most complex supply chains. I think there are, X number of, almost, I think, 20,000 plus gases just used in a semiconductor plant, for
Very
example, right?
true.
You can't get everything in one country for sure. There are machinery which is coming from different continents. There are different chemicals which are coming from different regions and countries, just as an example, right? What this means is, when you are building any industry which is so complex, you need to have a supply chain which can still be resilient, but at the same time, what can you do yourself? You can't do everything yourself, and that's how global
True.
trade supply chain works, right? So in my opinion, when we are making a decision, I don't think it's a decision west versus global south.
Hmm.
That's my personal opinion, because it's not either or, it could be both. It will be even within the west and the global south. There are different countries, each country has its own merits, each country has its own, what they bring to the table and what India can bring them on the table for them, and we have to create our relationship on back of that.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. So, what you are suggesting is a more collaborative approach rather than having sort of, this is what I believe is friendshoring in my mind, because you're not choosing partners, rather, you're working with everyone for something that is required by the country. So, and I think India has always played in its own interest in that regard. We have been peaceful for the last, I don't know. We we were not part of any world war. If I don't think we were part of any world war apart from two.
Yeah,
I think we
there's
were part of two.
some I think support, but again, yeah,
Yeah, but we did not willingly participate in any of the wars, I think. I-
yes, I believe so.
We have been a neutral country for a very long time, and I think that has played in our advantage. And but do you think that that could backfire considering that now we are seeing a lot of polarization across the world? Because, I mean, there are multiple factors and there are multiple reasons for which maybe a country would be needed to pick a side. And if so, where does India stand in that?
That's maybe for Ministry of External Affairs to decide, but but having said that, I think since you've asked me the question,
I'm
I
just asking from a manufacturing point of view.
no, I still I think it all boils down, right?
Yeah,
Because I don't think there is a need to choose a side, right? It's all about working through with different partners for for different partners for different themes and actually generating value for both and potentially beyond. I think that's a simple rule. If you just simplify, right? But at the same time, I think to your earlier question, right, what really will define the new global trade route is trust. And it's like, as Vidya Balan in the movie says, I think in the future it's all about trust, trust, trust. If you can't trust someone, how would you build something which is long lasting? Because in the when things are more uncertain, you need you can only count on a few friends
right.
versus counting everyone. Definitely there'll be allies, they are partners, but there'll be few of those who you can actually call friends, right? I believe we we are as a country, in my opinion, are very fortunate to call a lot of countries our friends because we have shown that we have a time tested friend and will be there when they need. Not, let's say, if it's not something which I have the expertise on, if I'm choosing a side just because someone is asking me to do, I don't think that's the best way. In my opinion, we need to take what is logical, take an opinion or take a stand which is logical, which benefits all parties. And if there is some conflict between someone and both are our friends or allies, we can always work together as actually those as a mediator, right, who can actually help debottleneck and navigate the situation.
That's great. I mean, if that is possible, I think that would be the best stand for India because in that way, India would be standing with India. Okay, so I think, Abbas, my next question for you is going to be that currently we have seen that there have been a lot of discussions surrounding the India US tariff um, policies, amendments that are going to come in place in the next few weeks, as of now. I mean, as per what I've heard. So, how do you feel about that? And how do you think that is going to impact India? Do you think that is going to? I think a lot of people have said that this would crush the Indian economy. But I personally believe that a lot of the GDP that we have comes from the internal demand of India itself. Export, anyways, forms a very small percentage of our total, I would say, sale in general. So these tariffs that are coming up, would that impact the friendship that we have built with the US over time, the partnerships that we have developed with the US based entities? And second, will that impact the Indian businessmen and the companies which are based here in India? And how do you think this would impact the companies which used to import Indian goods back there? So, three parts of the question. Very difficult. Very difficult question,
Thank you
yes.
for the difficult question. Let me start by saying what is my read of India US partnership
Mm-hmm.
first, right? I think I believe this is a, as our prime minister also speaks whenever he's in US, right? This is a partnership between the world's oldest democracy and world's largest democracy. This is supported by our, let's say, this is the fundamental framework, but between that, the web, in my mind, of which actually, or the glue which actually ties us together, is the India diaspora,
Right.
right? Which I believe is one of the most influential diaspora in the US, who have contributed to the American economy massively. And who still loves India and they're still very much Indian at heart. Having
True.
said that, this is a foundational pillar in my mind. What India US ties means, and we have shown this, and these are the some of those ties which is not depend only a few sectors. This is very strategic, going beyond just a few foundational sectors, but actually across multiple sectors, across multiple themes, and across multiple institutions as well. Is this something which gets tickled away or antagonized with what's happening? I don't think so. Again, it goes back to our earlier discussion, which is like partnership and trust and the way we are going forward all defines how a great relationship with a country is built together. And I think we have done that over years.
Yes.
What's happening right now potentially is not great.
Mm.
But having said that, I think still a lot of things are shaping up. Who, how, I don't know that how this will shape up in the next few weeks or months. I think I was just reading the news. Some of the orders, let's say Walmart's, Amazons of the world, have paused some textile order which they do from India, for example. I'm sure there'll be some of those momentary hiccups which will definitely come till the time real certainty comes in. So I would not like to speculate because I don't know what's going to happen, how things will change over the next few weeks or months. But at the same time, this goes back to the foundational thing. If we have the right trust in the partnership, and partnership is not just about two leaders or partnership about the ecosystem, an Indian ecosystem with an American ecosystem. I believe that in my mind is very strong, which where our diaspora actually plays a very pivotal role for us. And I believe that will potentially, and when hiccups come, I think you there is also an opportunity to strengthen it even more. So I'm an optimistic. So I would actually think whatever is happening, it will help us even form much more deeper ties and on areas and actually help both the countries reimagine some of the themes that we can look up eye to eye into some topics which we previously could not. So hopefully that actually paves even for a much more mature and a forward looking relationship is my thought process.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm glad that we can still be positive about everything that is happening around us. Um, we have been a little worried back in the office when we discuss about the tariffs. Well, but here's hoping that things will get better and eventually both the countries which have been an ally for a very long time and have had positive partnerships in all regards will find a way out of this. They'll definitely navigate through the situation. So that brings us to our last question. You have worked with a lot of different policymakers. You have been in discussion with a lot of leaders. You've worked with startups and MSMEs as well. And I think you've worked across sectors. And as of now, where do you think is a need for a policy change? Or what would be your recommendation to the policymakers, to the decision makers, to further help India grow in different manufacturing sectors and for the MSMEs and the smaller companies which are working, enabling this ecosystem as well, would be supported by certain changes in the policy, which is, I would say, need of the time? What would be those few recommendations that you'd like to make?
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could, then let me start with what I would want or what I hope where we would be, let's say, next 5 to 10 years, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm a foodie, so I'll take an analogy with my favorite evening drink, which is chai or a cutting chai.
Perfect.
Right? So, in my mind, what we should aim is to create a cutting chai where we have the right level of balance between when we say milk and water, that's the right level of balance between creating for us and creating for the world, right? It is spiced with a little bit of or the right amount of different technologies, if you may, right, where we have self reliance on those technologies, and it's our own technology which we can pepper in, right? So these are the different chai masalas, if you may. It's being sweetened with the right amount, and I'll say right in inverted commas, right amount of allies and partners which are global. So we are working with those people for that cutting chai who can actually contribute meaningfully both ways, right? And finally, served in a nice cup, which is made in India but yet global. So that is what I aspire us to create in the future. Now, if I go look back in time and think about now and way forward to achieving that perfect cup of chai, I think three things which will be really helpful, and I think we're working on all. But these three things definitely will be instrumental to bringing all of this together. The number one, to your point, we discussed earlier, it's about innovation, holding on the IP, and having an appetite to fail. I think that has to be the first major thing I would really encourage us to do more. We still, as a percentage of our revenues spent, let's say we can definitely spend more on R&D, innovation, IP. We've I think a lot has changed in the last decade or so in terms of what's happening. Can we do more? Absolutely, and I look forward to for making that happen. The second is the talent. Also, what we spoke about earlier, it's about building talent which is future ready, which is not just now and here for the next few years. With technology and how technology is shaping up or changing things so massively and rapidly, I want our engineers of the future or workforce of the future, which can think 10, 15, 20 years ahead and actually build in skills from now, which will be helpful to ensure that they cannot be replaced. They can only just get better with technology. And the third thing, in my opinion, is our how we are approaching some of our global trade partners, right? I think there is so much what we can offer to the world and world to us as well in some form. How we select those right spaces and work with like-minded partners on those areas, right? Be it defense, aerospace, space, manufacturing, the areas which you're talking about. I think these industries are multi-trillion dollar industries in itself globally, with so many subsectors, so many sub verticals, and if you break each vertical, sub vertical, it's hundreds of components. So there is space for all. What where do India play where it will be most impactful, and just choosing those right areas with the right partners. I think these three things would be the top of mind in my mind, which we can fix together, so that that perfect cutting chai we can get in next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I think this was amazing. Thank you so much, Abhas. I believe this was very insightful and it was a thought provoking conversation. I think that these insights would definitely help us understand how we can build trusted partnerships, which will then shape resilient and future ready global value chains.
Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today and stay tuned for the next episode of Vision 2060.